Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome everyone to the Perdana Dialogue series, a complementary program to the annual summit. Our focus is on good governance, multinational development initiatives, and civilization. The topic of our dialogue today is on system of government. My name is Rafi Yusuf, the CEO for Perdana Dialogue Foundation.
My name is Jihad Omar Ahmed Baswedan, and I'll be your co-moderator in this session. We are fortunate to have with us today eminent personalities to provide their insight and foresight on the system of government. We will have a special address by Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, the former Prime Minister of Malaysia. After the address by His Excellency, we will then have a dialogue with Tun Dr. Mahathir and our panelists that will provide their varying perspective on the subject. Our panelists are as follows. The former Deputy Prime Minister of Turkey, His Excellency Dr. Amirullah Ashler. The former Minister of Planning and International Cooperation of Egypt, His Excellency Dr. Amr Darraj. The former Foreign Minister of Tunisia, His Excellency Dr. Rafiq Abdul Salam. The Secretary General of KL Forum, His Excellency Dr. Abdul Razak Makri.
After spending almost 2 decades focused on international development, it is a common knowledge to many that the root cause for poor development is a poor system of government. But what is the system of government? Why does it matter? And how can we progressively induce innovation and enhancement to the existing system of government, both at the national level and international level? These are among the key questions we will attempt to deliberate in search for a better system of government. Clearly, we have varying types and effectiveness of the various system of government in practice in all the 197 countries around the world. Is there an ideal state of system of government? It appears some systems are dysfunctional. As an example, it's puzzling to appreciate a country with rich resources yet regarded as poor or underdeveloped. Another example, in Africa, trade among them in many cases have to be done via a third country, a bad deal for both the producers and consumers in Africa. At a global level, the world has embraced the Sustainable Development Goal in 2015. But for us to realize this global ambition, we need a working and effective system of government, first at the national level as well as the international level. Are the existing global institutions and platforms such as the United Nations, IMF, G20 sufficient and effective to realize this global ambition as a shared responsibility? Perhaps what is missing in our conversation on system of government and governance is the spiritual aspect. The system of government and governance needs a soul.
In our dialogue today, we will deliberate on the lesson learned from the past, but equally important is for us to frame the system of government for the future. Already the pandemic of COVID-19 have put existing system of government both at local and international level on the edge. We are now at an early stage where technology and private sector can be expected to play a more dominant role in shaping the system of government, as compared to our conventional thinking, where the system of government is addressed through our executive and legislative branch of government. As an example, already the social media companies like Twitter and Facebook appears to have unilateral power to moderate and shape social norms. Current studies have showed that the population today stands at 1.7 billion between the age of 15 to 24 years. Therefore, youth participation is crucial in shaping the emerging system of government, as they should be expected to assume the leading role. The youth have come to a new realization that prosperity is not economic wealth, but rather it is justice. Just check out the social media trends. You will have a better insight on the thinking of the next generation. وعليه نقول ما هو دور الشباب اليوم في نظام الحكم؟ وهل الأنظمة الحالية هي أنظمة احتوائية أم هي أنظمة تنفيرية? It would be appropriate to quote what Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu said. If you want to see the future of a country, look at It's man and woman.
Honorable Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Excellencies, welcome and thank you for being with us today. We shall begin with a keynote address of His Excellency Tun Dr. Mahathir, followed by intervention from our esteemed panelists. We will also conduct partly some of the session in Arabic. For those who are following live streaming from our Facebook, please do provide your comments, suggestion and question, but please indicate your name and association. We hope to share some of your comments and questions in the last 50 minutes of this dialogue. Towards the end of the dialogue, we shall again have Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad to provide further insight by providing his key takeaways during this dialogue. Honorable Prime Minister Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, you have the floor.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I feel privileged to be asked to give the keynote address at this second meeting of the KL Summit. We are unable to meet physically, but through this, the internet, through Zoom, we can still converse with each other. I hope that we can achieve some of the ideas through this system, although we are not able to meet each other. Now, I've been asked to talk about systems of government. Obviously, there are many systems, and systems of government have been introduced because of the failure of the previous system. It all started with a kind of strongman rule, but after some time, it was found necessary, as the community grows bigger, to have a different system of government. And then there was the monarchy system, which lasted a long time. But then the monarchies also failed in many ways, and people begin to think that they should rule themselves. And so we have the republics, we have the city-state like those in Greece, where the people want to rule by themselves, But they find that it is quite impossible when the numbers are big, so they resort to having representatives. And representatives were given power. As we all know, power corrupts. So after some time, the representatives began to become corrupt and fail in their governance. And so we have to go back to a system that is now very popular, but still based on the idea that people must rule themselves, for themselves, by themselves. And this is what we now call democracy. Democracy means that the people will have the power to influence the governance of their country so that they will gain the most from having the government. But unfortunately, even democracy seems to have failed. We find, for example, that although the leaders are chosen by the people, eventually if the leaders stay on too long and they have too strong a support, they tend to abuse their power. And this we have seen in many countries in our times. The latest one, of course, is the case of America. The United States of America, is a democratic country. It has functioned quite well for many, many years. And then we find that the person chosen to be the president seems to be abusing his power and doing things that was not the normal things expected of the President of America. So what is happening is that we have a system, and the system is the democratic system. It is a good system, but unfortunately, when in the hands of a bad leader, the system can be abused. and abused extensively. People begin to think that they must get rid of the leader who's been abusing the system. By getting rid of a leader, it's not easy. He has his own strength, he has his own backers, and he would continue to rule the country despite becoming already unpopular. In other countries also this can happen. Malaysia is a democracy. We have had leaders who were chosen by the people, but we have a bad choice, and then we find that a prime minister chosen democratically by the people abusing his power to the extent that the country suffered very badly, having incurred losses in business as well as indulging in borrowing from foreign sources, from international sources, so much money that it placed the country in a very difficult position because we have to pay the debts incurred by this leader, democratic leader. What I'm trying to say is that systems are good. We all try and improve on systems. When we introduce a system initially, it's quite simple, but then new things are added to it, and then it becomes very complicated, and then there will be abuses, and then the system is rejected by the people, and a new system needs to be introduced. So it is really not the system that is the problem. It is the people who are operating the system. If the person operating the system is not of good quality, then the best of systems will fail. Even if we have a monarchy, for example, an absolute monarchy, but if the man who is the king is very considerate, is very concerned about the welfare of the people, he wants to spend all the money on building the needs of the country, then the monarchy also functions. It is a system which many have condemned, but in the hands or led by a good, considerate ruler, the system may work very well. But a democracy, which is supposed to be the best system ever invented by man, at times we find that the chosen leader is not a good leader. He abuses his position. He does all kinds of things that are detrimental to the well-being of the people. This we have seen recently. Of course, the example I stated just now was the case of America. This is a country that boasts of being a great democracy. They have a system that works because in a democracy, if there are too many parties contesting, then almost none would ever have a good majority to set up the government. In that case, they will have to form a marriage of convenience between the big party and one small party in order to gain the necessary majority. And that doesn't work so well, because in that case, the small party would be demanding a lot for itself, because if it leaves the coalition will collapse and fall. So that kind of coalition is not very good for any country. In Malaysia, we have a coalition, but the coalition is before the election. They came together, 13 parties came together, form a coalition, and decide that in any one constituency, they will field only one person from any of the parties in the coalition. And all the 13 parties will back that candidate, although many, of course, will not be supporting candidate from their own party. It may come from any of the other 13 parties, but all 13 parties would support. And because they work together and they give support to each other, they have been able to win almost all elections. For 60 years, Malaysia had a coalition government made up of 13 parties, and the country remained stable and was able to function quite well. But then that is a coalition of 13 parties. But a coalition which is formed after an election, when no one has a majority, and there was a need for the biggest party to team up with a small party in order to gain a majority. In that case, we find that the small party would demand for all kinds of things, because the small party knows if it pulls out, the government would fall. Then we have many other systems, and of course the best system in a democracy is to have only two parties. When you have two parties, one or the other would win. When you have many parties, it's not always possible for them to have a majority. So a two-party system is seen almost in all the successful Western countries. In England, of course, you have the conservatives against Labour, and in America there is the Republican against the Democrats, and in many other countries also they have only two parties. But since democracy gives freedom for people to form their own parties and contest, very often there are too many parties contesting. So the system is good, but the way it is implemented is not good. And on the top of that, of course, is the question of who becomes the leader. Who becomes the leader because he has the majority. Now, if the leader is very well focused on developing the country, on giving his best in order to see the country benefits from his rule, then this democracy will work. But over time, if a person stays on too long as a leader, there is always a tendency to abuse the system. So it is not the system, it is mainly the person concerned. So how do we ensure that the person who is elected as the leader in a democratic system will do well, will carry out his task with full responsibility for his country? This is a question of value system. You know, everybody has certain values, and these values determine the quality of the man, determine the behavior of the person. If the qualities are good, then of course he will deliver, he will do well. But sometimes they have bad qualities. For example, some people work hard because working hard is a part of their culture, their value system. But in some countries, people tend to be laid back. They do not work hard enough, and because of that, their performance is not good. Now, for a leader, there is a need for some spiritual feeling, some dedication to higher values. That means that if a leader is well, we will say religious, and adheres to the religious values of his faith, then it is likely that he will be a good leader. Now, as we all know, Islam is not just a religion. It is also a way of life. And the way of life of anybody, of any group or people, determines whether that person or the group will succeed or not. Now, we see some countries doing well in terms of their performance. They are doing well because they have a good set of values. For example, they are very hardworking, they are very honest, they deliver, they uphold justice, they are not cruel. All these things come from the inner self, the value system that is upheld by the person, or better still, by the community. Now, if we have that kind of value system, I am quite sure the leader will be performing very well. But how do we ensure that the leader has these good values? I find, for example, that our religion of Islam provides us guidance in terms of values. What are the values of Islam? This is given in the Quran, and if you go through all these values, you will find that they are all very good, and they all will make you a better man. But unfortunately, most of us, although we claim we are Muslims, we perform all the what is compulsory for us. We pray, we fast, we give the zakat, and then we perform the Hajj, we say the article of faith. But beyond that, we don't seem to be following the teachings of Islam in terms of our values. For example, this is a very clear example. Islam forbids us from killing. To kill a person is to kill the whole of humanity. And certainly a Muslim must not kill a fellow Muslim. But you know, today we see them killing each other, doing nothing else but killing each other and performing the work of their enemies. So this is clear that although we are Muslims, we do not follow all the teachings of Islam, and we follow our feelings, and we do things based on some teachings by certain people. Some people would lead any group to encourage you to do acts which are contrary to the teachings of Islam. So if we want to have a good leader, or we want to have good leaders in the Muslim world, I think we should go back to the Quran and do what the Quran says, and not do what some people say, some leaders say. So then I think we would have a better set of leaders, and they would provide good governance for any country, irrespective of the system. A system is important because it puts into perspective all the needs of governing a country, but you need a good person to make that system deliver the best that is supposed to come from that system. So I believe that at this moment we need the system which allows the people to influence the governance of their own country. And of course the people will want to have the best for their country. Although sometimes, of course, some people, some countries where the education is very low, maybe the citizens are unable to distinguish between what is best for them and what is not. So then the majority might elect somebody because of corruption. For example, corrupt leaders might pay people to vote for them, and then of course you are going to see a government of corrupt people. and that will be very bad. So the ordinary citizen, should be very careful about the leaders they choose. If they are very well educated and are able to distinguish between what is good and what is bad, what is well promoted, especially by our religion, and what is denied or proscribed by our religion, then I'm quite sure we would be able to set up good governance based on some system. Democracy is a very good system, but other systems also can be good if the leader is good. So I hope that in the course of our discussion, we can hear views about the kind of environment or the kind of situation that will help Muslim countries to be ruled by good governments who cares for the welfare of the people and for the development of their countries. I think I should stop there and let's hear the comments. Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency, Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. Before we get on the specific intervention by all our esteemed panelists, I'm just wondering if any of the panelists have some clarification at this point to Tun Dr. Mahathir and what was said. If not, we will invite our panelists one at a time to be able to deliver their specific remarks. Any question, remarks, clarification that would be helpful at this point to Tun Dr. Mahathir, panelists? Excellency? Anyone?
Just a brief question. I'm Rafiq from Tunisia. Dr. Rafiq.
Please, Dr. Rafiq, please, go ahead.
Just to clarify from His Excellency about his view, want to be sure whether the problem in the political system itself, let's say the democracy is called the democratic system, the liberal democratic system, in itself, which is misfunctioning due to the accumulation of crises and problems, or just the problem of the political leader themselves. That, for example, that we have seen during the last few days, if not few weeks in the United States. Is the problem is within the political system itself, or just related to the political leader himself?
Yes, political leader plays a very major role in determining whether the government works or not. But also the people must understand the system. If they don't understand the system, it will not work. For example, in a democracy, by voting, simply voting, putting a tick on a piece of paper, you can elect a person. But obviously, when there is a number of parties contesting, not all the parties can win. Only one party would win. But I noticed that in many countries, the losers do not want to accept losing. When they lose, they say that it must be due to some cheating, and they go back to the streets and try to bring down the elected government. Now, in a democracy, it is important, of course, for the conduct of the election to be done well and without any cheating. But what is important is that the loser must accept having lost and wait for the next time the election is held. But if the loser refuses to accept the result and take to the streets and try to bring down the government, then democracy will not work. But having done that, of course, the quality of the leadership is important. Leaders should always think about their followers, not about themselves, must think about their followers, the people who elected them. So if we have good leaders, I am quite sure that with acceptance of the system where the majority would lead the country for the time being, maybe 5 years, maybe 4 years, and the losers will support or at least not try to bring down the government, then democracy will work.
Thank you, Tun. Any further clarification that could be helpful? Clearly, it's not just the system. The system is manifestation of the value system that Tun has outlined and emphasized a lot. So it will be better for us to try and figure out how to build a good value system throughout the world. Any question, any clarification before we move on to our first? Please, His Excellency Dr. Amro Daraj.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khairan, Dr. Mahathir, for this very valuable talk. Just wanted to clarify that when we talk about Islam that has a very sound set of ethical values that could govern, that could maintain a good system of governance, in many cases, actually, people have been misusing Islam, claiming that they are governing according to Islamist values, and actually this would give a very bad example for that. A lot of people in the West and even in our Muslim countries argue that Islam cannot work to provide a governing system just because of the practices that they saw happening from these rulers. So I would like you to shed some light on this, please.
Yeah. Well, I would like to say this, that Islam is not wrong. Islam is perfect, but the followers are wrong. They do not really follow the teachings of Islam. If they follow the teachings of Islam, they will be successful in life and in death. That is my belief. Because when you read through the Quran, you find that all the good values are promoted in the Quran. For example, when you judge with justice. That is emphasized many times. Even simple things like when you weigh things, when you are selling or buying things, when you weigh, you must weigh accurately and use a good weighing machine. All these things are given in the Quran because the way of life of Muslim is governed by the Quran extensively from birth to death. So if you follow, I'm quite sure you will do the right thing. But what has happened now is that people have hijacked the religion and say that this is Islamic. It's not Islamic at all. How can you say it is Islamic when the Quran says you cannot kill and you kill? And it is horrifying to see a man being killed while they begin with Bismillah, in the name of Allah, the merciful, the compassionate, and then you kill a person. That you are doing exactly the wrong things, forbidden by Islam, but you do it in the name of Islam. So this is happening in many places because we use Islam in order to get leverage, because when you say this is Islamic, Muslims are attracted to it, they support it, but actually you are not doing what Islam teaches us to do.
Thank you, Tun. If I may, if there's no further urgent question or clarification at this point, if I now would kindly invite all the panelists now to be prepared with their specific intervention on the topic of system of government. First off, in no particular order, if you don't mind, His Excellency, the former Deputy Prime Minister of Turkey, Dr. Amrullah Ishla, you have the floor. If I understand you correctly, you will deliver your address in Arabic. So what's going to happen is after His Excellency deliver his address to us, Jihad will do a quick summary on what was said by His Excellency. His Excellency, you have the floor.
تفضل معاليكم.
الوزراء المعالي أيها المشاركون السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بداية أقدم شكري الجزيل لتنظيم هذه الندوة لمناقشة أنظمة الحكم في العالم وخاصة في العالم الإسلامي. وسبق وأن استمعنا إلى كلمة السيد مهاتير محمد واستفدنا من كلمته وتجاربه. فأنا في كلمتي سأتكلم عن تجربة تركيا، يعني تطبيق نظام الحكم في تركيا، وكذلك لي بعض الملاحظات فيما يتعلق بالمشاكل التي نعيشها في الوقت الراهن في العالم الإسلامي من حيث الأنظمة الحكومية أيضا. طبعا هناك 3 أنواع من الأنظمة الحكومية. أولا النظام الرئاسي يكون فيه الفصل بين السلطات شديدا، وهناك النظام البرلماني يكون فيه تنظيم توازن بين السلطات بشكل أنعم، وهناك نوع آخر من النظام نصف الرئاسي هو مزيج من النظامين الرئاسي والبرلماني. طبعا حينما نسلط الضوء مثلا على الدول المتطورة، مثلا في الاتحاد الأوروبي هناك 28 دولة مشاركة في الاتحاد الأوروبي. الدولة الوحيدة التي يطبق النظام الرئاسي هي دولة قبرص اليونانية، وهناك 3 دول تطبق النظام نصف الرئاسي في الاتحاد الأوروبي، و24 دولة تطبق النظام البرلماني. إذن هذه كلها دول متطورة ودول ديمقراطية تطبق هذه الأنواع ال3 من نظام الحكم. أما في تركيا، نحن طبعا أول دستور في العالم الإسلامي كان في تونس. تونس دائما لها أسبقية في الربيع العربي، أيضا أسبقية لتونس. في عام 1861 أول دستور في العالم الإسلامي تم صياغته في تونس. بعد ذلك بعد 15 سنة في سنة 1876 كانت في الدولة العثمانية. إذن أول دستور في الدولة العثمانية كان سنة 1876. بعد ذلك تشكلت البرلمان في عهد الدولة العثمانية رغم وجود السلطان أيضا. بعد ذلك حينما تأسسنا الجمهورية انتقلنا إلى النظام البرلماني اعتبارا من سنة 1921 حتى سنة 1918، يعني قبل 2 أو أكثر من 2 انتقلنا إلى النظام الرئاسي الجمهوري. يعني نحن طبقنا النظام البرلماني أكثر من 95 سنة. ما هي عيوب هذا النظام البرلماني كان المطبق في تركيا؟ أولا، خلال أكثر من 90 سنة تشكلت في تركيا 65 حكومة، يعني عمر الحكومات أقل من أكثر سنة ونصف. كانت هناك بعض الحكومات عمرها 3 أشهر، حتى أقل من 3 أشهر. بعض الحكومات عمرها 6 أشهر. لكن ما بين سنة 50 و60 كانت هناك حكومات. في حكومة الحزب الواحد عهد مندرس استمرت 10 سنوات، عدد الحكومات قليلة. بعد ذلك في عهد حكومة حزب العدالة والتنمية أيضا اعتبارا من نهاية سنة 2002 إلى اليوم عدد الحكومات أيضا قليلة، لأننا يعني حزب الواحد يحكم البلد، لذلك لم تتشكل حكومات كثيرة. بتغير رئيس الوزراء طبعا تشكلت حكومات، لذلك العدد قليل جدا وعمر الحكومات طويلة. لكن في عهد الحكومات الائتلافية التي عشناها ما بين اعتبارا من سنة 70 إلى تشكل حكومة حزب العدالة والتنمية في سنة 2002، كانت هناك حكومات كثيرة، حكومات ائتلافية، وكانت هناك مناقشات حادة بين الأحزاب السياسية، حتى بين الحكومات المشاركة في نفس الحكومة أو بين الأحزاب المشاركة في نفس الحكومة الائتلافية. لذلك كانت هناك لا يوجد استقرار السياسي. المشكلة الأخرى أيضا كان يتم انتخاب رئيس الجمهورية من قبل البرلمان. كانت انتخاب رئيس الجمهورية كل مرة يؤدي إلى أزمة كبيرة. طبعا هناك نحن في تركيا عشنا انقلابات عديدة. أول انقلاب كان في عام 60، الانقلاب الثاني في عام 80. قبيل الانقلاب العسكري الذي يعني في سنة 1980 كانت هناك جولات لانتخاب رئيس الجمهورية من داخل البرلمان. كم تتصورون عدد الجولات لانتخاب رئيس الجمهورية؟ عقدنا 115 جولة والبرلمان لم ينجح في انتخاب رئيس الجمهورية. أعيد مرة أخرى، 115 جولة في البرلمان لانتخاب رئيس الجمهورية، والبرلمان لا يستطيع أن ينتخب رئيس جمهورية التي له صلاحية رمزية. يعني رئيس الجمهورية في الحكومات البرلمانية في نظام الحكم البرلماني له صفة رمزية، لكن رغم ذلك البرلمان عقد أكثر من 100 جولة ولم يستطع في انتخاب رئيس الجمهورية. ومن بين مبررات الانقلاب العسكري من قبل العسكريين قالوا أن البرلمان أصبح فاشل ولم يستطع أن ينتخب رئيس الجمهورية، لذلك نحن قمنا بهذا الانقلاب وأنقذنا البلد من الأزمة السياسية. إذن بسبب هذه العوامل والعيوب للنظام البرلماني في تركيا دعا كل من السيد أربكان الله يرحمه إلى التحول إلى النظام الرئاسي. وكذلك المرحوم البرسلان تركش هو رئيس الحركة القومية أيضا دعا إلى الانتقال إلى النظام الرئاسي. بعد ذلك في الثمانينات المرحوم أوزال أيضا دعا إلى الانتقال إلى النظام الرئاسي. بعد ذلك السيد ديميرال أيضا المرحوم كان في البداية يرفض النظام الرئاسي، ولكن حينما أصبح رئيس الجمهورية هو أيضا دعا إلى الانتقال إلى النظام الرئاسي في تركيا. بعد ذلك لما أتى السيد أردوغان هو دائما دافع عن النظام الرئاسي، وفعلا سنة 2017 حققنا استفتاء. أولا قمنا بتغيير تعديل دستوري في البرلمان، بعد ذلك قدمنا هذا التعديل للاستفتاء في سنة 2017 والشعب أقر هذا التعديل الدستوري وانتقلنا إلى النظام الرئاسي، ولكن أضفنا إلى هذا النظام الرئاسي الجمهوري، ولكن كما تعلمون أنه نظام رئاسي. كيف كان يطبق النظام البرلماني في الحقيقة؟ أريد أن أضرب مثال أيضا من تركيا. كما تعلمون أن السيد أردوغان وصل إلى سدة الحكم نهاية سنة 2002، وكان هناك رئيس الوزراء في النظام البرلماني ورئيس الجمهورية الذي لها صلاحيات رمزية. في ذلك الوقت كان السيد أحمد نجدة سزر رئيس الجمهورية، ولكنه منتمي إلى إيديولوجية أخرى، لذلك حاول أن يمنع كل القوانين. كيف كان يشتغل البرلمان والحكومة؟ كان البرلمان يناقش قانون ويوافق على القانون، بعد ذلك يرسل إلى مقام الرئيس الجمهورية للمصادقة على هذا القانون. كان أمام رئيس الجمهورية 15 يوم لدراسة هذا القانون، إما يصادق نتيجة 15 يوم أو بعد ذلك يعيده إلى البرلمان. لكن كل مرة كان رئيس الجمهورية يمنع هذه القوانين ويعرقل ويطول المدة أيضا. كان يعيد كل قانون الذي سنه أو أقره البرلمان إلى البرلمان مرة أخرى لمناقشته. وكان البرلمان ماذا يعمل؟ يناقش مرة أخرى ولم يغير لا نقطة ولا كلمة ولا فاصلة، ويرسل هذا القانون مرة أخرى إلى رئيس الجمهورية. وكان على رئيس الجمهورية أن يوافق على هذا القانون دستوريا طبعا، ولكن كان يطول المدة وكنا نفقد الزمن. وأمضينا 5 سنوات في رئاسة أحمد نجدة السدر بهذا الشكل. وبعد ذلك لما وصلنا إلى سنة 2007 كان أمامنا أن ننتخب رئيس الجمهورية والكتلة الأغلبية لنا داخل البرلمان. وفي ذلك الوقت سيد أردوغان رشح سيد عبد الله كل لرئاسة الجمهورية، ولكن جاء الإنذار من الجيش بعدم موافقتهم لانتخاب السيد عبد الله كل كرئيس الجمهورية لأن زوجته متحجبة. لذلك لم نستطع في ذلك الوقت انتخاب السيد عبد الله كل، ولكن اتخذنا قرار بإجراء انتخابات مبكرة، وفعلا أجرينا انتخابات مبكرة. وفي نفس السنة أيضا قمنا بتعديل الدستوري، ونتيجة هذا التعديل الدستوري أقرينا بأن رئيس الجمهورية ينتخب مباشرة من قبل الشعب. في الحقيقة بالتعديل الدستوري التي أجريناه سنة 2007 تركيا انتقلت إلى النظام نصف الرئاسي، لأن الشعب بدأ ينتخب رئيس الجمهورية مباشرة وليس البرلمان. وبعد ذلك كانت هناك طبعا في سنة 2017 سنة 2016 محاولة انقلابية لجماعة فتح الله جولان، ونتيجة هذه المحاولة الانقلابية الفاشلة تركيا دخلت في مرحلة جديدة. وأيضا رئيس حزب الحركة القومية السيد دولة بحجلي اقترح أن ننتقل إلى النظام الرئاسي من النظام البرلماني، وبناء على ذلك قمنا بتعديلات الدستورية في البرلمان، وأيضا قدمنا للاستفتاء والشعب وافق على هذا التعديل الدستوري. والآن منذ أكثر من سنتين ونصف نحن دخلنا في النظام الرئاسي. طبعا في النظام الرئاسي هناك لا توجد ازدواجية في الرئاسة. كان في النظام البرلماني هناك ازدواجية، رئيس الوزراء من ناحية ورئيس الجمهورية. الآن رئيس الجمهورية هو رئيس الحكومة وأيضا رئيس الدولة، لذلك يتم اتخاذ القرارات بشكل سريع. وكذلك الآن رئيس الجمهورية طبعا مسؤول أمام الشعب، ويقدم أيضا نهاية ولايته يقدم حسابه للشعب، وبعد ذلك يدخل في الانتخابات مرة أخرى، وإذا كان هو ناجح والشعب ينتخبه مرة أخرى، وإذا كان غير ناجح والشعب لا ينتخبه مرة أخرى. إذن هذه هي التجربة تقريبا الديمقراطية في تركيا. نحن الآن يعني انتقلنا إلى النظام الرئاسي الجمهوري، ويتم في هذا النظام الرئاسي الجمهوري اتخاذ القرارات بشكل سريع، والشعب طبعا ينتخب رئيس الجمهورية ويقدم له الثقة مباشرة، ولا تحتاج إلى أخذ الثقة من البرلمان في هذا النظام. لكن هناك فصل السلطات مطبقة بين في هذا النظام الرئاسي أيضا، يعني القضاء مستقل وحيادي. أضفنا كلمة الحيادية في التعديلات الدستورية في سنة 2017 بالنسبة للقضاء. لكن الآن أريد أن أشير إلى بعض النقاط. ما هي المشاكل التي نعيشها في العالم الإسلامي، أو ما هو الفاصل بين العالم الإسلامي أو الفوارق بين العالم الإسلامي والعالم الغربي الذي يدعي أنه عالم ديمقراطي؟ في الحقيقة مشكلتنا في العالم الإسلامي أننا لا نجد لا توجد أنظمة قوية في العالم الإسلامي. أقصد بذلك مؤسسات الحكومة في تركيا وفي بلدان العالم الإسلامي والعربي مؤسسات ضعيفة. مثلا في أحد الحكومات البرلمانية، في أحد الحكومات الائتلافية، لو لا تتشكل حكومة خلال شهر أو شهرين تحدث أزمة كبيرة في تركيا. لكن في أوروبا حينما ننظر إلى أوروبا، مثلا في بلجيك أحيانا تشكل الحكومة يأخذ وقت أكثر من سنة سنتين، ولكن المؤسسات تشتغل بشكل سليم. فهذا يشير إلى أن الأنظمة أو المؤسسات الموجودة في العالم الغربي مؤسسات قوية، ولكن مؤسساتنا في العالم الإسلامي مؤسسات ضعيفة. لذلك العالم الإسلامي يحتاج إلى أنظمة قوية ديمقراطية، سواء كان نظام الحكم برلماني أو رئاسي لا يختلف، لكن ما نحتاجه إلى أنظمة قوية مؤسساتية في العالم الإسلامي. ولدينا قيم كما أشار سيادة الرئيس مهاتير أيضا، لابد أن نتحلى بهذه القيم. الإسلام، المشكلة ليس في الإسلام، المشكلة في المسلمين. نحن لم نفهم القرآن ولا مغزى الإسلام. لو فهمنا الإسلام وكان تقييمنا للإسلام تقييم سليم لكنا نحن دول متطورة. إذن يوجد هناك خلل، لا بد أن نركز إلى هذه النقطة، أين الخلل؟ مثلا السيد أردوغان، ما هي صفات السيد أردوغان؟ يعني الذي شخصية سياسية قوية وبارزة وناجحة، واكتسب في تركيا أكثر من 15 انتخاب منذ تقريبا 20 سنة. إذن ما هي عوامل النجاح للسيد أردوغان؟ السيد أردوغان بقدر إمكانه هو يريد أن يتحلى بقيمنا الإسلامية، يعني له بعض المزايا، مثلا الرجل مخلص، وبعد ذلك يشتغل بجدية وصادق لا يكذب أبدا، وبعد ذلك رجل شجاع يتخذ قرارات، فبعد ذلك طبعا يكون دائما حليفه النصر. لذلك اكتسبت كل هذه الانتخابات التي دخلها في تركيا. إذن خلاصة القول، لا بد من تأسيس أنظمة قوية في بلداننا الإسلامية، لا بد أن نؤسس مؤسسات قوية. بعد ذلك علينا كمسلمين أن نتحلى بقيمنا. أما الغرب، ملاحظة أخرى أن الغرب لديها ازدواجية في كل شيء. هم يريدون الديمقراطية لأنفسهم ولا يريدون للآخرين، وخير مثال على ذلك الربيع العربي. نحن عشنا الربيع العربي، بعد ذلك الأوروبيون بما فيهم أو أمريكا لم يرغبوا في تأسيس أنظمة ديمقراطية في بلدان العربية، لذلك هم حتى تضرروا من هذه التطورات. ولما جاء الانقلاب في مصر صفقوا لهذا الانقلاب واستقبلوا الانقلاب السيسي أيضا في العواصم الأوروبية. إذن الديمقراطية والقيم الديمقراطية كلها في أوروبا لديهم ازدواجية، وكلها أيضا بدأت تتراجع هذه القيم في الدول الأوروبية. والمستقبل لنا، أنا أريد أن أشير إلى هذه النقطة، أن المستقبل للعالم الإسلامي، ولكن بشرط أن نستعد للمستقبل كما قلت قبل قليل بإنشاء أنظمة قوية، بإنشاء مؤسسات قوية، وكذلك بتحلي قيمنا الإسلامية. هناك العالم دخل في مرحلة جديدة. أنتم تتابعون أن التطورات في أمريكا في تطورات سريعة جدا، خلال ربما 10 سنوات كل العالم سيتغير. وأيضا كما قلت قبل قليل المستقبل للعالم الإسلامي، ولكن المسلمون الموجودين في أوروبا وفي أمريكا سيواجهون مشاكل كبيرة في الأشهر القادمة وفي السنوات القادمة، لأن العنصرية بدأت تزداد، والكراهية عن الإسلام أيضا، كراهية الإسلام أيضا بدأت تزداد في العالم الغربي. لذلك العالم دخل في أزمة كبيرة، ولا بد نحن كمسلمين أن نقدم حلولا للخروج من هذه الأزمة. وأنا أختم بهذا القول وأكرر شكري مرة أخرى لعقد هذه الندوة، وأتمنى أن نجعل مشاركين في هذه الندوة. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
عليكم السلام.
عليكم السلام.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. His Excellency has highlighted a few very significant points, starting from very beginning, the formation and the revelation of the Turkey, and how he explained further on the three systems that he explained: the presidential system and the parliament system, and a system that is a combination of both. He also indicated that about the first constitution, which will be has been drafted in Turkey, which was after 1876 in Tunisia. He also elaborated more, His Excellency, on the point where the challenges, the contemporary challenges that faces the current government, and how the legislative system has a very delayed process in executing and endorsing a lot of laws that was meant to be passed, and in addition, he also, His Excellency also highlighted the difficulty endorsed by the people of Turkey, and he shared his experience, and how Turkey had really a difficult time in its initial stage, as he indicated one of the story whereby there was an appointment made in 2017 to appoint a president, but he was not allowed to, due to the reason that his wife was a hijabi, was covering his her head. So in addition to that, he also shared with us his experience in 2017 and the change that happened in the government system of Turkey, whereby it used to be parliamentary in nature, has shifted to a presidentially, and from there there was a change in the constitution that was presented to the public and get the public opinion and endorsement, and from there today Turkey is having a presidential government system, and from there on he shared few challenges again with passing and going with the law itself. The legislative system has a lot of disadvantages in functioning properly, and then the last thing that highlighted by His Excellency was the important in decision making in every good government, and he also drew a very interesting comparison between the Muslim world and the European countries, whereby he highlighted that the governmental institution in the Muslim world unfortunately are weak compared to its counterparties, more stronger in its infrastructure and its policies and so on, so forth. In final remarks made by His Excellency was on the future, and that is extremely important for all of us to hear, is that he highlighted, His Excellency, the future will be for the Muslim Ummah, and the future is to adhere to the value of Islam, and how the government system that we all should adhere to and should play a significant role in any good government. He also, His Excellency, thanked the organizing committee for their hard work, and he also thanks Tun Dr. Mahathir on his remarks as to the topic of those who are using, unfortunately, or misusing the name of religion for their agenda, political agenda, if I may say. That's all. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. Clearly, we may not be able to do justice on what the Excellency Dr. Amrullah has said in his intervention. So we did a quick summary. So our apologies if some are missing. But clearly, the same emphasis was said as was done by His Excellency Tun Dr. Mahathir. The key point, the key takeaway is that education, awareness in terms of our value system is fundamental as we move forward in fixing the system. And secondly, we need strong institutions to be able to sustain and be resilient as we grow our economy. Let's move forward. We'll reserve some of our question and answer and dialogue towards the end of the session. At this point, if I may, I want to invite all the other panelists to now provide their intervention. Not to be rude, I apologize. We'll try and keep as much as possible to try within that 15 minutes, if you don't mind, His Excellency. We'll start off with His Excellency Dr. Amru Daraj from Egypt. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Jazakumullah khairan for the good preparation and for the valuable workshop. It is really informative and very useful this time. I would like to start my talk from the point that His Excellency Tun Dr. Mahathir talked when he described the different systems, the monarchy, the republic, the democracy, and he then concluded by saying that no matter what the system is, it has to have some good people to apply it in order for it to work. But I'm going to talk to you today about a different type of system that is impossible to work. That is the military system. And actually this is what we have been suffering in Egypt for almost the last 70 years. And I believe that everything that I'm going to talk about right now is the opposite of what a good governing system or governance system should be, and we have a very long experience in that. So that will be my topic today. This system, the military system, is impossible to work because there are no actually good people who are willing to work within that system. So the remark made by Dr. Mahathir probably, in my opinion, does not apply in this case and in such system. In Egypt, because this is actually this has been my experience and our countrymen experience, that since 1952 we have been under some kind of military rule, sometimes a clearly described military rule, a clearly explicit military rule, and sometimes it is a military rule but under the cover of a civilian of civilians. The only exception was just for 1 year, 2012 to 2013, under the leadership of the late Dr. Morsi, rahmatullahi alayh. He was the first and until now the last democratically elected president who got to that position in Egypt. And that was only made possible because of the uprising, the 2011 uprising that took place in Egypt. Actually, we are now celebrating its 10th anniversary, 25th of January 2011, that took place and allowed this kind of people's rule, selection of the people of their ruler, their leader. And but unfortunately, and I was part of that government of Dr. Morsi, but unfortunately that experience did not complete because of the 2013 coup we all know about. I'm going to explain right now how the military are ruling the country right now since the coup, as a model of a typical military rule that has reached the top of this is the top, the elite of the military rules. This is how far the military rules could reach. And there are maybe some better military rules of maybe better qualities, but now this one that we are experiencing now in Egypt has reached the top. So this is the model I'm going to talk about. If we talk about the political aspects that the regime is applying, there is actually such term disappeared. There is no political life in Egypt. Nothing. Political parties are farce. They are made only to praise the ruler. The parliament is simply formed by the intelligence and by the security apparatus. They are not selected by the people. All of them represent one security apparatus or the other, and all the elections are forced. So in terms of politics, there is no politics. In terms of the economy, and this is what is really bad, and it reached the top in Egypt, is that the military control almost 100% of the economy. People have been debating whether the military controls 10%, 20%, 40%, I'm saying that the military really controls 100% of the economy, whether directly through direct interference or indirectly through influence on others. There is actually no room for private sector initiatives, independent private sector initiatives, and the growth that is being claimed is only helping the elite that is based on the military elite and the people working for them. The middle class, if we talk about middle class, that unfortunately that has almost been depleted totally. Right now in Egypt, 2 years ago actually, the World Bank estimated that some 60% of the Egyptians are living under the poverty line or about to be at the poverty line. That was 2 years ago. I would comfortably say that this is probably like 70% right now. The total national debt had reached, according to the latest estimates by the Economist magazine, 116% of the GDP, which is of course huge. And the military are simply financing this alleged growth by debt, by borrowing money, keeping borrowing money, whether internationally or domestically. And of course, they don't care about paying back because they, by the time they leave, somebody else will take care of that. Of course, I'm just giving some bullet points. The time does not allow more details, but I'm just referring to some important aspects. Socially, which is also very important, the military rule has made sure that the society becomes totally in a total case of polarization. The society is extremely divided. You find people, like people living in two different worlds. Of course, if you talk about the education system, the healthcare system, all kinds of services are in a rotten condition. In addition to that, of course, there is no freedom of expression. You cannot express what you want to say. You cannot even if you even like a post on social media, you could be vulnerable to being prosecuted for that. So how this is, this kind of end result, how this was reached? What is the system that enabled that? It is not just a matter of a one-man show. Yes, it's a dictatorship and a one-man show. And as Tun Mahathir said, that sometimes there may be good dictators who could govern in a semi-decent way. But it's not just a dictator regime. It is a military control over everything. The military actually have swallowed the state. Now they are in every place in the state. They constitute all the key positions in the state, whether current officers or ex-officers, ex-military. And of course, a very harsh system of oppression is being used to silence people so that nobody could object, whether on media, social media, not able to go to the streets to protest peacefully. You cannot say a word. You would be directly oppressed and prosecuted and tortured and so on and so forth. So this is something that is systematic. What I mean is that the human rights violations are not just something as a side effect of the regime. This is a systematic policy that is being followed by the regime to assure control, to spread fear in the society. Everybody is afraid to say anything that is right, and we end up with a small group of elite, which is the worst type of elite, who are controlling the country. Of course, in terms of the shape, the appearance, you can say that this is democracy. There are elections. The president is elected. The parliament is elected. So is this really real? This is all fictitious, of course, as everybody now knows in Egypt, that the whole world knows about that. And if we talk about if if we try to see the impact of this on the three pillars that the Perdana Dialogue addresses, the governance, the development, the civilization, definitely we will never be able to reach any form of decent achievement on any of these three fronts. And for a country like Egypt, with over 100 million people population, and of course everybody knows that Egypt is in the heart of the Muslim world. If this is the case in Egypt, this definitely will have a dramatic, and is having a dramatic impact on the whole Muslim world and the whole of our region and the whole Muslim Ummah. Egypt has always been a model, whether in good things or bad things. So this is really bad, and the impact is tremendous. So again, if we want to talk about good governance, we have to look at the Egyptian model that is happening right now and go 180 degrees to the other side and apply everything that is not applied in that system. This is good governance. How about globally? How is this dealt with? How this status dealt with? As a matter of fact, the international community is not just overlooking this or not supporting the people. Actually, it is complicit with the regime and with such regimes, because they serve their purposes and they serve their ability to continue to control our world. Of course, they had to leave our countries, as during the colonization period, they had to leave our countries, but they wanted to still keep controlling them. So they definitely, for many purposes, for different purposes, we can talk about that forever, they support such regimes. And they make sure they don't want any kind of development, any kind of independence to work, or for these countries, for our countries to succeed. And on the other hand, they keep targeting democratic countries. They keep targeting countries like Turkey. They keep targeting Malaysia, where democracy is relatively decently working, and there is a very good degree of independence and development is taking place. Of course, we have criticism on any system can be criticized, but for these two countries, they are under continuous attack from the international community, although they should be relatively praised if they are compared with other countries in the area. So actually, this kind of government, my point is that this kind of governance has to finish from the world. There is a very powerful statistic that came to my attention recently in a study. Between the years 1950 and 2010, about 60 years, the world has seen about 440 military coups. 440. About 50% of these coups worked. 50%, which means more than 200 military coups in the last 60 years, or between 1950 and 2010, worked. So we are talking about a global phenomenon. We're talking about something that is not happening in one country or two countries. Maybe what is happening in Egypt now is clear because Egypt is a country, but all countries, one way or the other, have seen whether successful attempts or failed attempts. We listened to His Excellency Dr. Emrullah Echler about what happened in Turkey many times during the last decades. So what do we have to do? Obviously, people in the countries under such rules have to continuously resist, and they should not have in their minds that for some reason the West or the international community will come to help them, because as I explained, these are the forces that are actually supporting the military regimes. So they should rely on themselves. But we have actually to work for the longer term. We have to work on some sort of a global system that ensures that such military coups do not take place and are not supported by the international community. And if they happened, they should be criminalized. There have to be a serious stand by the world, looking at the numbers of military coups that took place and looking at how bad governance military governance or military non-governance is making life very difficult for our world. And this is definitely something that is by far much worse than terrorism, much worse than even the pandemics that are taking place right now. This is something that is ruining not just the present. It is ruling the future of our countries and leading to possible chaos. There have to be mechanisms, and probably the Kuala Lumpur Summit and the Perdana Dialogue should work on something that maybe in future could be adopted by the international community in order to criminalize such actions by the military and make sure that the military are well controlled by the civilian government system selected by the people. Thank you very much for your patience and listening to me.
Thank you, Shukran, Dr. Andrew Darat. Clearly, our prayers and dua for the safety and prosperity of the people of Egypt. And you have pointed out the critical issue about governance and system of government that function for the country. But equally important, you have pointed out that there needs to be a system of government that should work to help us at a global level as well. So that's going to be a critical function as well, not just at the national level. I will move on. We will reserve all the dialogue towards the end, as I said earlier. So we'll move to the next intervention. Will be His Excellency Dr. Rafiq Abdul Salam, the former Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs of Tunisia. His Excellency Dr. Rafiq, you have the floor.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Your Excellency Dr. Mahathir, our friends and colleagues, Dr. Amrullah, Dr. Amr, Dr. Abd Razak. It's nice to speak with you, and this virtual meeting, at least if we haven't, direct contact, at least, technology provides opportunity to speak with each other. Let me briefly make some few remarks before going to the main content. I think we live in a very globalized world, where it is no longer possible to separate countries and continents. This is why we need to look at political, economic issues from a wider regional and universal perspective. We can't separate the conditions of the Muslim world from what happened in other parts of the globe. We are living in a very globalized world where it is no longer possible to separate countries, religions, ethnicities. This is very interconnected, intertwined, universal system. That's why we need to look at the issues of the Muslim world from a wider universal perspective. And I think there are two contradictory features that characterizes current international relations. On the one hand, there is a growing tendency towards greater interconnection between different people, cultures, and nations due to the effects of technology. We are living in a digital universal world. This is one trend of the universe, of the world. But on the other aspect, there is a parallel tendency towards more protectionism and isolationism. It is not clear whether this deep conflict would lead the world. Even in one country, you find such contradicting trends, like what you have this polarization in the United States between the trend of globalization as well the other trend of protectionism in the name of identity and if not religion. If I go now to the current situation in the Muslim world, I think the main problem in the Muslim world as a whole, and more particularly in our region, can be summed up in the problem of governance. For decades, the region has been suffering under authoritarian and despotic regimes. It's a solid fact that the region is living under despotic regimes and authoritarian regimes, where the space of freedom is very limited, if not deleted by military and authoritarian political regimes. And I think the problem of corruption in the region is due to the absence of good governance and the monopoly of power and wealth by a limited circle connected to the regimes. The problem of poverty also, social marginalization, unemployment, is due to the political malfunctioning of the political system. In other words, due to the absence of good governance. This is also a solid fact that the Muslim world is suffering from misfunctioning or malfunctioning of the system as a whole, the problems of poverty, social marginalization, unemployment. All these issues is related in one sense or another with the problem of the political system and the absence of good and transparent governance. Of course, democracy is not ideal political system. Even in the West, it has been transformed from the rule of the people to the rule of a sophisticated elite. Democracy is not immune from crises and problems, as we have seen during the last few weeks in the United States. But it remains better than despotic regimes or the despotic regimes as a whole. This does not mean that democracy is immune from crises, from problems, like we have seen in the mature democracy in Europe and the United States. But I'm sure that the democratic political system is better than the despotic and authoritarian regimes. Of course, in the Muslim world, we are living a conflict, what I've called many times, a conflict of interpretation between authoritarian interpretation of Islam and democratic interpretation. For a heavy despotic regimes, they try to monopolize Islam, interpret it in their own way, based on the view that the ruler is immune from any political criticism, and the ruler himself representing religion as well representing the will of the people as a whole. On the other hand, since the 19th century, the beginning of the Islamic reformism, there was a grating tendency in favor of democratization and a view of interpreting Islam based on the compatibility between Islam and democracy. I think there is an ongoing also theological discussion in the Muslim world about the relationship between Islam and democracy and whether or not Islam... Do you hear me?
Yes, please, go ahead. We're still with you.
And whether Islam is compatible with democracy or not. I think this is a pointless discussion, in my view. Democracy is good for Muslims for pragmatic reasons. It provides a political system that is rational and efficient for the management of politics. As I said before, this does not mean idealization of democracy. I'm sure that liberal democracy had many and has many problems and even a crisis, but it remains better than the other alternative. It's better than the dictatorship and authoritarian regimes. And I think the discussion that we have seen in the Muslim world since the 19th century about the compatibility of Islam and democracy, whether Islam is compatible with democracy or not, there is a tendency that try to legitimize democracy within an Islamic framework, which is insisted that democracy and shura as similar. On the other hand, we have another trend, Salafism, which rejected any compatibility between Islam and democracy. Islam is seen as a value system and a political system which is completely separate from the liberal democracy. And I think this discussion is pointless and useless. We accept democracy for pragmatic reasons, for the simple reason that it is providing good governance, efficient and rational political system, which is better than the despotic and dictatorial political regimes. And as I said, democracy is not ideal political system, even in the West. I think the Arab Spring 2011 had provided the region as a whole with the historic opportunity to remedy its political ills and dismantle the heavy legacy of political despotism and authoritarianism. Unfortunately, a decade later, the picture looks bleak. After 10 years of what is called Arab Spring or Arab revolutions, the Arab world, the only country maybe that remains on track to democratization is Tunisia. But this does not mean also Tunisia immune from the internal as well regional crisis. We are facing many problems. I'll speak later on details about the problem of democracy in Tunisia, but at least it remains, on the track compared to other experiences or other Arab Spring countries. The region is currently in the grip of military rule, civil war, and authoritarian regimes. This is also a solid fact. The only experience that remains in the region with all its fragility and challenges is Tunisia. And I think the real challenge in the Muslim world is to build a transparent and efficient political system which is compatible with the value system and the needs of the Muslim world. This is the real challenge. If I speak now in some details about the Tunisian experience as a nascent democracy, and I think we're still facing many challenges and problems. I think one of the greatest problems that we have seen is the political progress has unfortunately not been matched on the economic level. There is a huge gap between people's aspirations and the state's capability. I think we made good progress on the political perspective. Politically speaking, we managed at least 5 transparent, free elections, check and balances powers. The space of freedom that the people are enjoying today is not comparable to the previous regime, pre-revolution, political regimes. This is a concrete reality, but I think there is a huge gap between the aspirations of the people and the concrete reality. Politically speaking, yes, there is good progress, but economically speaking, the achievements see limited one. I can't say that we failed, but at least it does not yet succeed. Those who rose up in the inner cities may enjoy more freedom than they had done in the past, but the quality of their lives has not improved much. There is still a high rate of unemployment. With the health crisis that we are facing with the pandemic now, the coronavirus, I think the situation will be more critical and more complicated. As I said, there is a high rate of unemployment, more than 15% now. Roughly, we reach 18%. Double. In addition to that, 30% among these are graduates. There has not been much improvement in the infrastructure, education, healthcare, or transport. We know that a genuine democracy could only function on 2 pillars, political and economic. And I can say that, politically speaking, at least we succeed, but the real challenge remains socio-economic one. But I think Tunisia is still trying to find the right balance between freedom and security. It is easier to bring down a despotic regime than it is to build a democracy. But in spite of all the challenges and difficulties, Tunisia still has potential for greater success. And I think if we succeed, at least we send a positive message to the region as a whole, that democracy is possible in the Arab world. At least we shatter the old postulate, the great narrative that is produced and reproduced within the intellectual circles, the think tanks, the journalists in the Western capital, which still insisted that democracy is not compatible with mainly in the Arab world. Of course, in the Muslim world, you have few, democratic or semi-democratic, experiences in Turkey, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, but the Arab world is still a very exceptional case. There is no single democracy that survived. That's why this is give a necessity and very important character to the Tunisian experience. As I said, if we succeed, at least that will shatter the old postulate that democracy is not functioning in the Arab world. Of course, democracy is not necessarily a magical solution for all problems. What is certain, though, is that it is not possible to build a real lasting stability without democracy and freedom. Since the Second World War, if not before that, after the dismantlement of the Ottoman Empire, the international system or the international policy with the great international power is based on the theory of stability. And the stability is a translation of the political stagnation. This means that a strong support from the Western capitals to the rulers of the region, whatever the character of the political regimes, either dictator regimes, authoritarians or semi-authoritarians, the main thing is to preserve the political stability, which is another word of the political stagnation. This is the international policy since the First World War, after the withdrawal of the Ottoman Empire from the Arab region and from the Middle East, what is called Middle East region as a whole. But now there is a strong conviction, at least within the Tunisian political elite, as well in certain Western countries, that it will be not possible to build a lasting stability without a certain degree of democracy and freedom. I think this is what gives Tunisian experience its own importance. Tunisia, of course, is not a superpower. It's not even a regional country. It's a small or medium-sized country. But we know that what is local in Tunisia in 2011 transformed in regional, has its regional effects. The Arab world and the region as a whole is deeply interconnected. And if democracy survived in a small country like Tunisia, it has great potentiality to succeed in other countries, bearing in mind that the crisis is still there. After the coup d'etat in Egypt 2013, this does not mean that the story of the Arab Spring, the Arab revolutions is finished. It's still there in the hearts and minds of the people. And I think I have to stop here. And my thanks to His Excellency Dr. Mahathir and our friends and colleagues from Istanbul, Ankara and Algiers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rafiq. An excellent intervention. Clearly a very difficult subject, system of government and governance in the developing world, where there are a lot of resistance and challenges that we face. We pray for the success of Tunisia. And you pointed out the importance of having a national resilience or national independence for us to be able to grow and develop on our own and not be dependent on the Western powers. I'm also glad that you connect the system of government to development. So clearly, we have addressed the issue. Why do we have a system of government, an effective one? At the end of the day, it has to be able to create development impact to the people at large, jobs, create economic growth, have better society, have better education. So if we don't have a good system of government, then we may not be able to achieve progress and prosperity for our own people. With that, I will now invite the last intervention. His Excellency Dr. Abdul Razak Makri, who is the Secretary General for the KL Forum. He has been involved in the discussion and topic of governance for a long time. So be glad to hear his views and perspective for us. Dr. Makri, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu ala Rasulullah. I am very happy to be with you, Dr. Excellency Dr. Mahathir and Brother Amrullah and Amr and Rafiq. I will try to speak about good governance, obstacles, case, and desired results. Humanity has known many types of governance and systems, such as the absolute hereditary monarchy, the constitutional hereditary monarchy, the democratic system with all its varieties, parliamentary, presidential, and complex systems. In all these political systems and governance, the history of mankind has known wise rulers who served their people and other unjust rulers who were a burden on them. Therefore, the contemporary trend of the concepts of good governance has come to talk about good governance in terms of its supports and obstacles, its case and mechanism, and in terms of its effect and results. And based on that, ruling systems are judged, regardless of their culture and civilizational backgrounds and the sort of systems and governance. Praise be to Allah that we as Muslims have a strong approach to good governance in terms of parliamentary texts in the Quran and the Sunnah, and the bright experience of the rightly guided Khulafa al-Rashidun. And in many periods in our Islamic history, that can be used and mixed with human good experiences in terms of governance to correct our delicate situation and achieve our hopes for good governance in our countries. I will tackle this topic through the following three axes: the reasons preventing the establishment of good governance in our countries, good governance action keys, the desired results. I will elaborate only on the first point due to the limited time, and my allocation concern especially the Arab world, which I know better. First axe, the reason preventing the establishment of good governance in our countries. Before talking about the keys to implement good governance, its effect and consequences, I will touch upon the main reasons that prevent it from being achieved through 6 points. Point 1, the prevailing public values and culture. Nothing changes people's condition like their deep convictions in the necessity of change. And nothing is more beneficial and robust and sustainable in forming convictions such as the values that people believe in. Those values implanted in mankind's instinct that we will call universal values, which Islam came to awaken and develop, like what was mentioned in the Hadith Mustafa alayhi salatu salam, I am only sent to complete the high morals. Then when values are established and spread, they become general culture in societies. Then building laws and necessary regulations to achieve the strict level of good governance will become easier. After that, these laws and regulations are themselves transformed into feeding the prevailing culture and those established values. When we talk about the features and standards of good governance, we are talking about higher values that are elevated by all the religions and cultures and civilizations, such as justice, honesty, responsibility, accountability, transparency, the common good, and so on. If these values are available in any society, people will preserve the good governance if it exists in their countries, and they will continue to improve it until it becomes a complete reality in their countries. On the other hand, if these values are absent and replaced by other bad values, such as injustice, betrayal, fraud, slander, selfishness, and corruption, then the path to establishing good governance will be difficult. And any model established under such environment will be unstable and fragile. If we look at the situation of most our Muslim countries, we will find that both faces are present, struggling against each other to survive and grow. We find virtuous values rooted in the people, created and preserved by the Islamic religion. We also find the opposite as well, created by deviant environment and fed by authoritarian regimes due to this complex situation within our societies. Politicians and scholars reformers found themselves strangling into two major paths, leading societies to adopt the values of good governance and pressuring governments to implement the standards of good governance. In this context, the Kuala Lumpur Forum has devoted itself to serve the values of good governance and spread them through its conferences, seminars, workshops held in various countries, and through the intellectual contributions of its members and through its various media activities. Point 2, not understanding the importance of good governance theoretically. A fundamental rule says, judging a thing is a branch of its perceptions. And the famous proverb says, man is an enemy of what he does not know. It is not possible to implement good governance in our countries without knowing its foundation by the elites, understanding its standards, seeing its effects in societies where good governance is established, and being sure of its compatibility with our Islamic beliefs and general principle of Sharia, and how they are compatible with the good deep-rooted experiences in our Islamic history. The more the theoretical knowledge about good governance are extended and spread in our societies, the more the resistance against political and social transformation toward good governance will be minimal and their impact will be limited. Unfortunately, only few groups of elites know the theoretical truth of good governance, and many of these elites do not explain properly its foundations and dimensions to the public. Some of them confuse people by introducing some frightening aspects that shake their social beliefs and political balances and make them scared and skeptical. For this purpose, the Kuala Lumpur Forum is working on drafting several programs to convert its declaration on democratic transformation and its declaration on good governance into training programs that consolidate values, spread knowledge, and build skills. These programs will benefit large numbers of Muslims, and we supervised and facilitated our trainers who work for the forum, as well as other contributors who cooperated with it. Point 3, lack of skills and the knowledge about the successful experiences in good governance among officials and official institutions, parties, and organizations. The Arab world does not know successful experiences in good governance. Therefore, political officials have not experienced its tools and standards. As a result, there is no recognized related skills to be learned in our countries. As we all know, the most difficult type of resistance in political and social transformations is the fear of untested new ideas, programs, and mechanisms, especially among those who are scared to use it and they don't know how to. On this elementary basis, many politicians in countries with the transparency and where they do not adopt clear legal procedures in governance, they consider the standards of good governance as intellectual luxury that has nothing to do with reality. For this reason, the Kuala Lumpur Forum, in cooperation with Umran Foundation, has established an international institute for remote education and training. This institute will offer various programs in the development field and the specializations of various government sectors in accordance with the standards of good governance. Registration will begin in the fall of the year. Point 4, lack of direct personal benefit from the positive effects of good governance. However, the values of good governance in societies are prevalent, and however the common knowledge about governance among elites is, and however big the efforts of education and rehabilitation to embody it, not seeing concrete benefits of good governance in the real lives of people does not provide good governance, good rules. A broad base that supports them, not seeing concrete benefits of good governance in the real lives of people does not provide good governance and good rules, a broad base that supports them and protects them. By saying this, it is important to remind everybody that what made Dr. Mahathir a respectable and celebrated leader among his people and internationally, and what made him pivotal figure in Malaysia, is his enormous success in achieving development and improving the daily good lives of his citizens. Also, the Turkish people would have not stood up together to protect the legitimacy of President Erdogan from the coup if it was not for his good governance that raised the standard of living of the Turkish people and transformed Turkey into a strong, developed, and prosperous country. In this context, the Kuala Lumpur Summit is putting an effort to gather successful governance experiences in the Islamic world and to initiate cooperations projects between them in the service of their peoples and the civilized resumption of the Islamic Ummah. Point 5, the resistance of political, economic, and social forces who benefit from the current irrational status quo. The man responsible for the state of backwardness, poverty, poor educational and healthcare system, and other bad conditions lived in the Arab world are the authoritarian rulers who have monopolized wealth, power, and prestige. These privileges became a reason for their attachment to power and preventing the people from their rights to choose their rulers and hold them accountable. Some of them do not hesitate to oppress their people and plot with foreigners against them to stay in power. However, experiences in history have shown that the continuation of this condition does not last, and things may suddenly turn against their rulers, which can result in losing their privileges and even their lives. Unfortunately, they may lose their countries with them as they plunge into agitations and struggles over power, from which neither the rulers nor the ruled would survive. For this reason, the Kuala Lumpur Forum has worked as well as it could through its conferences, seminars, and announcements, and various activities to explain the benefits of democratic transition and both ruler and citizens, and the broad prospects for good governance that accommodate everybody. The forum is also working to form delegations of prominent leaders to some countries after the end of the corona pandemic to conduct dialogues in this regard with influential leaders in Arab and Islamic countries at various levels, and an attempt to create practical path for the transition to good governance. Point 6, the obstruction of dominant international powers to establishing good governance in the Arab world because of their fear for losing their interests in the region. The existing international system does not help to establish good governance in our countries, contrary to its hypocrite claims and despite the large number of declarations and agreements issued by international organizations, especially the United Nations organization. The international system is dominated by the realistic international policy of the great powers that operate only for their own interest, even at the expense of people's interests. Because of that, the good governance have got a little chance to be implemented seriously and effectively everywhere in the world. There is no doubt that there are established tradition of good governance in Western democratic countries. However, these countries deal effectively with the standards of good governance only in their own countries and with their own people, while they impede them in our countries through their support for repressive regimes that continue to rule outside of transparency and democratic standards. When the theories of idealism in international relations retreated lately in favor of realistic theories, international organizations like the UN institutions became useless and their efforts to enable good governance did not become feasible. With the dominance of neoliberal trends nowadays, good governance is no longer at its best days. The crisis of poverty have increased and many groups were deprived of basic services such as education and healthcare, and environment became exposed to serious attacks that expose all the inhabitants of the globe to great dangers. Even in developed countries, the poor are getting poorer and the rich getting richer. And many peoples in those developed countries do not longer consider the rules as good rules. And we are seeing regular protests and demonstrations expanding more and more in the capitals of those countries. In order to contribute in correcting the situation, the Kuala Lumpur Forum is looking as a think tank institution, among other functions, to propose some new ideas that bring humanity together for a new, better world with more justice and more dignity. That was one of the main messages of the previous Kuala Lumpur Summit, which was held in Kuala Lumpur in December 2019, with the presence of prominent Muslim leaders and rulers. Second axis, keys to good governance work. I will just quote this, the titles of this good axis. What is the What is the case that make good governance established and work? There is at least 6 keys: promoting values, knowledge, and skills in the societies, changing the balance of power, well organizing democratic transition and national contract between the essential actors, building institutions in accordance with international standards of good governance, building a new international order in support of good governance. Third axis, desired results. I will leave this third axis in other opportunity. So I thank you for your patience. Thank you very well for all of you. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam. Thank you, Dr. Makri. Shukran. Barakallah fi. we are encouraged with all the different initiatives and that you are making effort to try and promote good governance in our part of the world and at the Arab part as well. Clearly, a lot has been said. A lot of ideas has been thrown in has enriched our discussion. The challenge moving forward is probably the solution and action we need to take. And in the conversation with Tun Dr. Mahathir and the rest of the panelists, it appears that we at least have few action items that we need to consider and get into detail, which we may not be allowed to do that given the time constraint. The first among which will be around education, awareness, communication. That seems to be the key factor in order for us to instill the right value and as we promote new leadership. The second around institutional building. How do we go about building all these new institutions that would safeguard and protect and help develop system of government as we move forward? The third, and I think Dr. Amru has suggested, the challenges that he faced in Turkey and and also in Tunisia, I would imagine, how do we move and help countries to move into a proper transition in terms without any bloodshed? The fourth around development program. So as we put together a system of government, at the end of the day, the result matters, and that result has to be around the development program that affect the people at large. And finally, we need to think about the action program around what would be the kind of global system to support and safeguard the system of government that we have today. Allow us to also now that sort of give a bit of highlight and in terms of what we take away from this session. And clearly there's a lot more work to be done in terms of action. Already awareness is already the first factor. Now we want to move on to the session where we would engage our public who's been following this conversation on Facebook and website and our YouTube to allow them to also interact and probably benefit from their own ideas, wisdom and comment as well. So with that, and I would invite all the Tun Dr. Mahathir and Excellencies to also respond to this question that we will now share on the screen. So maybe with the help of our colleagues there, so we'll present some of the questions. Okay, so this is coming from Rafi Mia. So dear Excellency, my question to the summit. What is the action about those people done the corruption involved doing migration matters? Some people done monopoly, the power market, 1 agency to 10 agency. Changing poor people fixed high rate of migration costs, but they enjoy money and opportunities. Still there's no action about all these culprits. We appreciate Your Excellency after taking power the toll system finish. If there's no punish, they will also be the same. So clearly he's talking about the issue about corruption and the migration issue. So Tun, maybe you want to respond to the concern and ideas coming from our comment on the Facebook. And perhaps other panelists as well. Please, Tun.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that we notice nowadays is the massive migration of people from some countries, mainly to Europe, to Christian countries, not to Muslim countries. Apparently, there must have been some failures on the part of Muslim governments and Muslim countries, which has forced their people to leave their own country. This is not something anybody would do without strong feelings, but such is the situation they have to face in their country, that they would prefer to leave the country to find a better life in some other countries, which of course means that we are seeing a lot of failures in many of our countries. If we want to stop the migration, then of course we have to provide good governance. That is why the Kuala Lumpur Summit focuses on good governance, because without good governance, people will lead a miserable life in their own country and they would want to go elsewhere. And we will lose a lot of talents, because some of these people are very, very good, very clever, but their service will not be for their own country. So here again, we need to think what has gone wrong with our governments. what has gone wrong with our countries. Mostly it is because we don't take seriously governance of a country. Everybody feels that he is qualified to run a country. Just about anybody can run a country. But it should be somebody who is quite capable and moved by certain passion to do something good for the country. I think this all begins with our education, right from the word go, right from the time when we are in the kindergarten, maybe at the age of 3 or 4, at which time we are receptive to all new ideas. There should be a concerted effort to implant good values. And I think for Muslims there is no problem, because good values come from Islam itself. Certainly the Quran teaches us a lot of good values. So if we start off by teaching our children good values, when they do grow up, they will know how to manage themselves and how to manage whatever position they might be in their own country. So it is a long process. There is no shortcut to it, but we have to try somehow. As the Chinese sage Confucius says, a journey of 1,000 miles begin with the first step. We are taking not the first step, but many steps ahead, and I think we should try and implant in the future generation good values. Of course, at this moment also, we should be discussing about this, and we should try to get our leaders to think about good values, not just qualification, not just educational qualification, but the character of our people must be such that they are able to deliver on their promises when they become the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Tun. If I may invite His Excellency the Deputy Prime Minister from Turkey, you see a lot of immigration issues and challenges, particularly coming to Turkey and migrating towards Europe. Maybe we can hear a little bit of your view and perspective from Turkey. Excellency Deputy Prime Minister.
معاليك تحتاج الترجمة؟ نعم.
Sure.
تفضل، ممكن ترجمة بسيطة؟
طيب نعم. ذكر المتحدث الآن خلال يعني أن نسمع من قبلكم تجربتكم فيما يتعلق بموضوع اللاجئين إلى تركيا. كيف تركيا تعاملت مع اللاجئين الذين أتوا إليها من بقاع الأرض؟ على حسب الإحصائيات في تركيا الآن أكثر من 6 مليون لاجئ نعم. فما هي تجربتكم؟ كيف كانت تجربتكم؟ كيف تعاملتم مع الوضع؟ تفضل معاليك.
طبعا بعد الأزمات التي نعيشها في منطقتنا، في الحقيقة هناك هجرة كبيرة إلى تركيا، كما تفضلت في سؤالك أن هناك أكثر من 6 ملايين لاجئ في تركيا. لكن تركيا هل كانت مستعدة لاستقبال هذه الكمية الكبيرة من اللاجئين؟ ما كانت مستعدة، ولكنها تعايشت وتكيفت مع الأوضاع، وبعد ذلك الآن أصبحت قادرة لمواجهة هذه الكمية الكبيرة من الهجرة إلى تركيا. طبعا بفضل بعض المؤسسات القوية، تركيا واجهت هذه المشكلة بشكل ملائم، والحمد لله الآن وجدت حلولا كبيرة لما نحن نعيشه من هذه الهجرة الكبيرة الموجودة في تركيا. ولكن طبعا تركيا تغلبت على هذه المشكلة وتكيفت هذه المشكلة مع هذه المشكلة. طبعا نتمنى أن يعود اللاجئون إلى بلادهم بعد أن ينعمون بالاستقرار في بلادهم طبعا. لكن لغاية ما يرجعون إلى بلادهم. تركيا الآن أصبحت يعني تستقبل هذه الكمية الكبيرة وتكيفت مع هذا الوضع الجديد، وقدمت حلولا أيضا أو أنجزت حلولا كبيرة لمشاكلهم، والآن هم يعيشون في تركيا بشكل جيد الحمد لله. ولكن نتمنى جميع الإخوة أن يستقر بلادهم وأن لا يضطروا للهجرة إلى بلدان الأخرى، كما تفضل السيد مهاتير محمد. أيضا السبب عدم الاستقرار في بلداننا الإسلامية خاصة، عدم الاستقرار يؤدي إلى الهجرة، وكذلك مستوى الرفاهية، مستوى المعيشة الضعيفة تؤدي إلى هذه الهجرة. نتمنى أن نتغلب على هذه المشاكل إن شاء الله في عالمنا الإسلامي قريبا، وشكرا.
Thank you, Your Excellency. His Excellency briefly highlighted the waves of immigration from and into Turkey, and he also said that Turkey was not prepared for that, but they had to adopt, and they managed very well to provide solutions and to try to tackle and overcome all the challenges they have encountered with. And he also said that in response to the immigration, civil societies play a significant role. Further, His Excellency also said that he hoped that all immigrants one day will go back to their countries, praying to the Almighty that all our countries will be safe and that we all go back. And he said that in last point, he highlighted, His Excellency, instability, it indeed leads to immigration, and I am a product of immigration, and I hope that one day I can go back to my country. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jihad. Thank you. We will probably go to the next question, and then we'll try and respond. Thank you very much for people who are participating, folks participating on the Facebook. We've got a lot of questions. We have to be selective. My apologies, we cannot go through all of them. This question comes from Rashid Karim. What should be the relationship of democracy with Islamic government, and how can it be manifested in practice? From Bangladesh, Rashid Karim is from Bangladesh. Tun, you want to respond to that?
Well,
democracy
I
and
think
Islamic
it
government.
is Islam and democracy is completely compatible. We may remember that when the Prophet passed away, he did not appoint anyone, but he knows that the people who accepted Islam would then have to work out as to who should lead them. And that was a democratic process. There was a college of electors, and these electors decided to choose the person who will take the place, not as a prophet, but who take the leadership of the Muslims. And they chose Abu Bakr. Unfortunately, he didn't live very long, but also quite unfortunately, the three other Khalifa who were chosen met a very unfortunate ending. But the fact is that the leader was chosen, not inherited, not by virtue of being the son or the daughter, but they were people who were obviously leaders in the society, and among the leaders they chose one of them to become the Khalifa. So that is very, very democratic. So Islam and democracy can thrive because there are many similarities. But on the other hand, of course, as I said just now, the people who offer themselves to lead must understand the teachings of Islam, must adhere to the teachings of Islam. It is not just about seizing power to become president or prime minister, but also to understand that as a Muslim, he has an obligation to follow the teachings of Islam. And certainly Islam, especially the Quran, gives us tremendous guidance as to what should be done, what can be done, what must be done. All these things are given to us. Of course, the context is different. This is, the message came 1,400 years ago. But I find that it is still relevant today. If you follow the teachings of Islam, I'm quite sure you will be able to deliver a good government.
Thank you, Tun. Dr. Rafiq, you made a point about Islam and democracy, so perhaps you want to add anything else to these in response to the question, Dr. Rafiq? Oh, sorry, cannot hear you. Maybe. Yeah, your mic.
Yes.
Okay, please. Maybe you have to repeat, Dr. Rafiq.
I fully agree with the approach of Dr. Mahathir about the compatibility between Islam and democracy, based on the value system of Islam as well the concrete historical experience. When the Prophet ﷺ passed away, he didn't inherit power to the companions, to the Sahaba, but the Sahaba themselves, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, had a meeting and they have chosen the right person. They chose Abu Bakr, appointed him by the will of the people, not based on the inheritance of power. But I think there is a lot of theological polemic and discussion within the Muslim world since the 19th century, even maybe before that, the end of the 18th century in Istanbul by the Ottoman reformists about the compatibility between Islam and what they called at that time the Madaniyah, including the democracy. But I think democracy is not necessarily a philosophy, it's not an ideology, it is a political system, and based on pragmatism, on concrete reality, there is a need to implement or to adapt the mechanisms of democracy within an Islamic framework. But I think the main challenge that are facing the Muslim world is not theoretical one. It's based on the ground. So the main question is how to democratize the Muslim world. It's not just how to accept or to adapt the principles of democracy, because democracy in the Muslim world, mainly in the Arab world, is a very complicated process. When you start the process of democratization, you will find great difficulties, internal problems, crisis, regional intervention. What happened in Egypt is not a very theoretical problem, that the Muslim Brotherhood, whatever the reservation that we have about them, that they didn't accept the laws of and principles of democracy, but they were maybe victims of the narration of democracy. They look at democracy as something theoretical, but they didn't look at the challenges, the obstacles, and the heavy intervention that will be they faced at that time by the regional powers as well, international powers. So I stress this fact that there is a need to look at the ground, to look at the concrete reality, more than looking at books or theoretical approach about the problem of democracy in the Muslim world.
Indulge us a bit more time. I know we are running a bit out of our time limit. We'll have two more questions, so we'll have the next question from our Facebook. So this is Abdinur Moha. My name is Abdinur Mohamad from Somalia. My question is how to get a system that the people for every country are satisfied for their desire and wants, because we have seen many countries which is ruled by a dictator that is not elected by the people of their country. So Tun, any advice, any response on how we can give hope to the younger generation?
Yeah, I think culture, the value system of a people, plays a very important role. If you have the right value system, then you will do the right thing. But if you have you learn your value system from friends and things like that, you may get the wrong impression and do the wrong things. So our education system must stress the character of the Muslims so that they will adhere to the teachings of Islam. Most education system stresses only acquisition of knowledge, but now not how to use the knowledge. How to use the knowledge depends upon your values. For example, we see now today, the West is always stressing wars. They are spending billions and billions of dollars to build and invent new weapons on how to kill people. They seem to be very happy that they could kill more and more people. They have actually reached a stage when they can wipe out the whole of humanity, because this is their view of things, that war is legitimate, that war is a means of solving conflicts. If you teach your children that, then they grow up becoming very violent and wanting to have things for themselves without thinking about the effect and the result. You see what is happening in war-torn countries. Whole countries are destroyed today because wars today are not like wars in the past. In the past, armies fight against armies. But today, the whole country is at war. Nobody is free from being attacked by the enemy. They will bomb whole towns. For example, one German town was totally destroyed, and the people there were not soldiers. They were men, women, and who are normal people, children, sick people. The same thing happened to Hiroshima, for example. They tried to destroy the whole of the city. So we have come to the stage when we think nothing about killing 70,000 people at one stroke, and we think this is a great achievement. I think it is because we are taught, or rather in the West, they are taught that war is legitimate, and therefore you must prepare for war by having all the weapons that can destroy things as much as possible. I think it is a very primitive way of thinking. Modern man should not think of killing people in order to solve a problem. So I do hope that in order to have good governance, we must implant in the minds of our children and in the schools, in the universities, that war is a crime, that war should not be resorted to until you are attacked by the enemy, but to deliberately invade a country as the American and the British did to Iraq is something criminal, and people should be punished for that. That is my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Amru Daraj, you spoke quite a bit about military rule and dictatorship. You care to respond to our friend from Somalia?
Now I believe that there is a good opportunity for Muslims to provide a comprehensive model of good governance to the world. The whole world needs a new model, actually. And Tun Mahathir actually explained the contradictions that the West is falling into, not just by the wars that are done, but also internally, even in their own countries. As we saw, people are more and more dissatisfied with the rule of the elite, that is making other people not accessible to wealth or to power and influence in the country. And the Muslim concept or the Islamic concept is not just related to the way the ruler is selected. Of course, it's a very important aspect of Islam that is Ummah is the source of legitimacy of the rulers, and the Ummah should select and approve the ruler. And in this aspect, Islam is quite compatible with democracy, or let me say that democracy is quite compatible with Islam, because of course Islam was on earth first before democracy. But this it's not just that; it is the value system, as Tom Mahathir explained very well, and also the legislature. And we cannot actually live in or follow a specific aspect of Islam, which is the value system, and leave the rest of Islam, which is legislation. And there is a room to develop a very good set of legislation based on modern standards, but are also compatible with Islamic Sharia, that will provide a complete system that I believe will solve a lot of the problems facing the whole world.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Amro. The one last question we'll take from our participant on Facebook. This question comes from Ami Roslan. So good afternoon to our honorable panelists and organizer. I am Ami Roslan, an architect from Kuala Lumpur. I have a question for Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. Throughout the history of Islamic government, from the rise of Khulafa Rashidun to the fall of the Ottoman, from your point of view, what are the key values of their governance and that we can take and adapt to our system today in the 21st century?
Well, not much that we can learn or we can adopt from the previous governments of Muslim countries, because many of them expanded through wars, and of course they acquire a lot of territory for themselves. But we in Malaysia, we don't hanker after enlarging the country, although we did open up our country to 2 other territories in the island of Borneo. We expanded peacefully by consent. They had a referendum, and they decided they should join us and become a bigger country. But in the past, we find that wars were fought regularly. Every year they go to war. But that is not something that is promoted by Islam. We should spread the religion, but not through violence, but through showing that the Muslim religion is a religion that gives success to the practitioners, to the followers of Islam. And that in itself will influence people to accept the religion. And with that, the territory where Muslims live would become bigger. So in Malaysia, we are not very violent. We are rather, I would say, timid people. We don't fight. We like to live a peaceful life. So although we have people of different race, different religion, different culture, different language in Malaysia, we decide that we should be tolerant towards the differences that is to be found between us. And I think this is in keeping with the teachings of Islam.
Thank you, Dr. Mahathir. Maybe at this point, the question also asks about the question about suitability or effectiveness of the future system of government in the 21st century. Maybe if I can invite Dr. Abdul Razak, who's done quite a bit of work in terms of the civilization and Islamic civilization through the Ottoman Empire, and now a reflection of what would be the kind of system of government for the 21st century. Dr. Makri, if you want to say something in response to that question that was posed.
Yeah, I tried to say in my allocation that mankind known good rulers and just rulers and just rulers regardless of their culture and civilization and their sort of systems. And I tried to say that the problem isn't with Islam but with Muslims. Islam provide us a general pillar, and a large path to find the good governance, and we have to try to know the causes prevailing the good governance, and to benefit of the what humanity is set up for to have the good governance. I think Kuala Lumpur Summit try to do something for that, and I think we have a lot of how to say, we have to do a lot of things, and it's very difficult to reach this point and to reach these hopes, because the input for good governance are complex, and the causes prevailing the good governance in our countries are complex, and we have to help each other to reach these hopes, and that's what Kuala Lumpur Forum try to do.
Thank you, Dr. Mahathir. So this comes to the end of our dialogue. Before I do my final conclusion in terms of logistics, if I may invite Dr. Mahathir to provide us some guidance, some highlight on your wisdom on how do we move forward from now.
Yeah. Well, I believe that the KL Summit has focused on a very important issue in the Muslim world, that of good governance. We must have good governance if we are going to give a good life for our people. And there are many different kinds of government, and during the KL Summit we have studied them, we have shown their good sides and their negative effect, etc. So from this, I think maybe scholars, students might write on the system of governments, and which system serves the Muslim world best. Of course, at the same time, I would like to stress once again that it is not just system that will deliver the goods. The character of the people as a whole, the character of the leaders are very important. If you have the wrong character, you are not going to be able to make even the best system work well for you. And today the best system, many people believe, is the democratic system. This is all about the people who want to be ruled by themselves. But of course, physically it is not possible. So we have devised many systems which enable the people to have a say in their government, or at least a say in choosing the leaders. We have, has been pointed out, a system of parliamentary democracy, where a parliament is chosen, and the parliament then debates, and all the matters, including by the opposition, and there is a cabinet made up of the majority party, which will try to carry out the governance of the country. That is the parliamentary system. But of course, we also have a presidential system, where the president is given certain powers that includes veto certain of the decision made by the legislature. We find, for example, the American system, where the president can only be impeached. He cannot be charged with any crime or any wrongdoing. But if there is something wrong with him, there must be impeachment through the legislature. And now, of course, there is a question as to whether, now that Trump is no longer the president, whether he could be charged for the things that he did while he was president. So that is a presidential system. Then there are other systems like monarchies, absolute monarch, and monarchs who are, like in Malaysia, we have a constitutional ruler who is not an executive, but still plays a role in the lawmaking of our country. So there are many different systems that we can study, and we don't have to take only from one system. There are other systems which may also be taken in and combined with other systems. For example, in Malaysia, we found that the 5-year development plan of the communist countries was effective and useful. So Malaysia has its 5-year development plan, but that does not detract it from believing in capitalism, not absolute capitalism, but capitalism in the sense of having capital to be used to invest in order to create jobs and prosper the country. So there are very many things that we have discussed here today. We have heard many different views. We have also tried to answer some of the questions. I'm quite sure there are lots more questions they would like to ask, but as usual, we will not have time for the question to be answered. But I think if you are interested, you might correspond with the Kuala Lumpur Summit to find some answers to your question. So I believe the Kuala Lumpur Summit has served a useful role in at least making the Muslim world aware of a very important thing in the welfare of the people that you rule. That is to say, to have good governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Tun. System of government is for the people, not for the elite. It is not about securing power, but for us to empower the people at large. We want to thank the Honorable Prime Minister, Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, and all the esteemed panelists, His Excellency. But more importantly, we want to thank all those listening, contributing to this subject on governance, development, and civilization. It is a conversation not only among policymakers, but more importantly, among the people at large. Only when we have a system that combines the vision and implementation, we can foster systemic change. Please continue to visit our website and share your thoughts, experience, and aspiration. Do suggest areas to focus and project to pursue for our forthcoming dialogue and summit. Our future dialogue includes topics in areas on economic development as well as on civilization, such as the Fourth Industrial Revolution, sustainable development, green industrialization. Please do share your thoughts on topics that matter most to you.
Thank you for investing your time with us today. We look forward to your continued support to help shape the next system of government and development. Please, please, please stay at home, stay safe, take care of your loved one, and always, always be positive about our future as Muslims. And بهذا نختم آخر كلامنا بجزاكم الله خير جميعا وبارك الله لكم ونفعنا الله وإياكم وسبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت استغفرك وأتوب إليك سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين بارك الله فيكم
بارك الله فيك. شكرا.